Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show will revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Moosie Drier and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Moosie Drier, and today we are thrilled to welcome the former Senior Vice President of Rock Promotion at Columbia Records, where he was instrumental in the careers of such artists as Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, the Rolling Stones, Elvis Costello, Billy Joel, and many, many more. He's also the author of the great book, Gliders Over Hollywood, Airships, Airplay, and the Art of Rock Promotion. And I found out that he's a fellow AE Pi fraternity brother. So please help us welcome Paul Rappaport. Paul, thanks so much for joining us today.
Wow. AE Pi. Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
We can't do that. We can't. Thank you. We can't do the secret handshake over video because then we'll give it away. But
right.
But there is one.
We'll get ostracized. Right.
Right.
Well, we have a lot to cover, and the book is fantastic. But I want to start by going back with you. You grew up in LA. I want to know, who were some of your favorite artists as a kid?
Well, okay, as a kid growing up, I'm from the 60s surf culture. When I'm growing up in LA, of course, you know, the Beach Boys are a big deal. Dick Dale is a real big deal. That sound, you know, coming out of that electric guitar. So those are the first memories that I have. I had some cousins who came to visit from Baltimore, actually where I was born, but I grew up in Southern California. So, and what was amazing was I was playing all these Beach Boy records, and I was dressed, you know, in mod dress shirts and, you know, light blue pants and, you know, surfer stuff. They came from the East Coast, and they were bringing different music right. with them, right? So I'm listening to Ain't Too Proud to Beg. They're playing me this, right? I'm playing them car songs. They're playing me Ain't Too Proud, you know, they're playing me Temptations, For Time. And I'm thinking, wow, wait a second. The car songs are cool, but these people are singing about real life subjects, right? Ain't Too Proud to Beg. The guy's like loves her so much. So there was this cross-pollination of music and clothes, because when they showed up, they were all East Coast with like see-through shirts and gold chains. I was like, you guys look weird. Like, right. At any rate, so for me, Beach Boys, Dick Dale, folk music hits, Bob Dylan, and then, of course, you know, the Beatles, you sort of took over everybody, but the Rolling Stones for me, when I'm 17 years old, or maybe I was even 16, when the Stones first, oh, there you go. They're my guys. I mean, I just never looked back. It was like, oh my God, these guys are talking to me. I want to be in that gang. They look dangerous. I want to be dangerous. And I learned how to play guitar listening to those first two Rolling Stones albums, listening to Keith Richards. We don't have YouTube. We don't have anything. It's a freaking record, you know, with a tone arm. You're ruining your records because you're dropping the tone arm. What's he doing? Drop the tone arm back again. How's he doing that? So for me, Rolling Stones, since I was 17, were my all-time favorite band. They're still my all-time favorite band. I have other favorite bands now. You know, I love blues, so I love ZZ Top and you know, stuff like that. But the Stones for me, you just, it's rock and roll. You can't beat it. You know, look, these guys are like 80 something, and they're still setting the record straight of who's the greatest rock and roll band in the world.
Yeah.
Well, it's all subjective. I mean, honest to goodness, when it comes to the Stones, so there's the Great Pyramids, there's Stonehenge, and there's the Rolling Stones. Like, but they're still together today.
Yes.
Like 2025. It's really unbelievable. Like it's. I read Keith Richards' book a few years back. You ever read his book?
I did. I loved it. It was fantastic.
And then like somewhere on the cover, I think it says something like, "Believe it or not, I remember most of it," or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's what he said. Believe it or not, I remember everything. Which surprises me because I went on tour with them for a little while.
Yeah, ask about that.
So I'm surprised they're still touring, you know. But what do I know? I you know, I thought, oh my God, this is like, you can't do this stuff, and you know, but they're out playing, and what do I know, right? So, and who am I to judge, right? I just
you know. And they're still, you know, the last time I saw them wasn't all that long ago live, and they're still pretty tight. And I love that you love the Temptations. I grew up loving the Temptations too. Like so that's kind of part of who you became in your profession is you brought in your, you got some souls, a little Motown feel, little Temptations, I Can't Get Next to You and all that stuff, Ball of Confusion or whatever else their
Yeah.
other hits were that weren't necessarily the mainstream songs they did. So you had like soul and then you had rock, everything in between apparently. So yeah, that's
Well,
gotta.
I liked cool jazz. In college,
Mhm.
I loved Miles Davis. The only when I started working for Columbia, the one thing that I had to learn was because I was such a rock guy and I had such an attitude, like, there's rock and there's nothing else, right?
Yeah.
And then they said that you have, but in the beginning, I was promoting all formats of music as an album promotion man, and so so I promoted country, and I was like, country is like it's all hokey stuff. And then somebody took me to see Tammy Wynette.
Mm.
And I went, oh my God, I get it. It doesn't matter the genre, right? Then I saw Johnny Mathis, right?
Yeah.
You want to talk about an artist, the way he approached the mic, the vocal, like, and I went, oh, wait a minute, lose the attitude, dude, because you're seeing some of the greatest music
Yep.
you've ever seen. It doesn't matter. Good music is good music, right?
Yeah.
And then down the line, I met Willie Nelson, and he and I were buddies, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, so I'm glad you say that,
Well,
and I'm hoping that the younger generations are more open minded because you and I had the same experience. So when I grew up, I was like you, where dude, the Stones, yes, Beatles, Aerosmith, Van Halen, but I feel like it was weird to admit like my guilty pleasures, and this leads me to my next question. Like one of them was I freaking love the Carpenters. You went to high school with Karen Carpenter, is this correct?
yes, I did go to high school with Karen Carpenter.
She
Yes,
didn't have
did.
much going for her because she was beautiful, had the best voice on the planet, the most cleanest voice, and a drummer. How cool is that?
We didn't know a lot of that. Okay, she was a drummer in the band. Okay, if you're a girl in the '60s, and first of
Yeah,
all, if you're a drummer, it's looked upon as strange. It's just odd, right? Just with the way
yeah.
things were then. She didn't care. I mean, to her, it was just normal. And we knew she was a drummer, and we knew she had a band. Now, we didn't know much about the band. I knew that she was learning how to play the drums.
Hmm.
There was a Hispanic guy named Frankie Chavez, really cool guy, who was teaching her the drums, and then she was taking lessons in Drum City. We were all in psychedelic rock bands, right? And I didn't know, and we didn't even know she could sing. All we knew, all we
That's
knew was,
incredible.
no, look it. It's just a high school buddy, right? She sits in front of me in French class. We're pals, right? Like she knows that I need help in French tests. So every time there's a French test, she leans over to her right so I can kind of peek over and see what's going on. So, but beautiful human being. And we're pals, and but we didn't know we had a music teacher at Downey High, went to Downey High, and his
That's
name
what I
was
was going to
Mr.
ask where you
Yeah,
were. Right.
Mr. Gifford. Wonderful guy. All we knew was that he was helping Karen. That's all we knew. Okay. Lo and behold, we graduate. She gets a deal, gets a record deal, with, I believe it was A&M. And all of a sudden somebody says, oh, Karen got a record deal. There's a record out. I'm like, you're kidding me. I'm like, we were all struggling. Like, how does Karen, because we didn't know, right? So how does Karen get the record deal? So
How did the drummer get there?
right. So I was driving trucks for my dad in the summer. He was in the reconditioning steel barrel business. So I'd drive a truck with 200 steel barrels. I'd load them, unload them. The truck's a big ass truck, like 8 speeds forward, 2 speeds reverse, So I'm on my way to Bakersfield or somewhere to pick up a load of drums. And I pull this giant truck off the side of the road to one of the stores then was Wallach's Music City. And I pull the truck off the side of the road. I go into Wallach's Music City. I'm at this point I got hair. I got a hairband. I'm like, whatever. I said, do you have an album by the Carpenters? They go, yeah. I go, really? They go, yeah. So it takes them a while. They go in the back, and I think was it called Offering? I can't remember their first album, and they show me this album, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm incensed. I'm stomping around the floor like, are you fucking kidding me? Karen, Karen Carpenter's got a record. Oh my God. How could we not get a record? And Karen got a record, and I'm mad, right? I'm stomping around, and I go to leave, and they go, well, don't you want it? And I went, no. Because, I was just an attitude. But then we hear her voice on the radio.
Oh my God.
And we're like, oh my God. Like, what? We had no idea. And like you said, and guess what? She could play the hell out of the drums. I mean, this is like a multi-talented person. All we knew is she's our buddy Karen. She plays the drums at school, and all of a sudden she's got a record deal, but now she's becoming a star. And now we have to shut up, because as good as our bands were, we're not her, right? She's like mega. So
I want to ask about your band, because I love this. I love the name. You had a band, Mogan David.
That band, in college, yes. Mogan David and his Winos. It wasn't my band. It was a friend of mine's band that I auditioned for with my drummer friend, and we got in and we had a blast. This whole band is a send up, right, on rock and roll. The whole, if you read the liner notes are fantastic. They're written by Harold Bronson, who was the leader of the band, who actually went on to, he's Rhino Records. He's co-founder of Rhino.
Wow.
Yeah, because what happened was he wanted to take the band on the road. I didn't think we were that good. I was going to get a steady job at Columbia at that time, and I said, "Look, I can get a steady job." I said, "Harold, to be honest with you, even if we are that good, I don't think I'm made for the road. I think I'll be a tragedy if I hit the road. I won't survive it."
Right.
At any rate, he said, "Well, if you're going to go do that, then I'm going to go start a label." This guy Richard Foos, he wants to start a label, so he went to start Rhino Records, and I got the real job at Columbia. But the Winos band, interestingly enough, has become legendary, and it's all over the internet now. I still play in a band, and the guy's my bass player is also a record producer. Sat me down, and he starts clicking through the internet, and he starts playing me tracks off this album that I haven't heard in years. And he goes, this is all over the internet. I go, no, I know it's a collector's item. Like like if you go on eBay and you want, Savage Young Winos, which is our album, a takeoff on Savage Young Beatles. It goes for like $133. The Savage Young Beatles album with Pete Best goes for $3.50. I mean, go figure. But there's fun songs on there. It's very eclectic. You're talking about 60s. There's a blues song on there written for the editor of the UCLA Daily Bruin, right? I went to school at UCLA college. And his name was Stan Berkowitz. So Harold wrote a song called the Berkowitz Blues. So instead of a pentatonic, I don't know if you guys are players, but instead of playing a pentatonic guitar solo, what you do in the blues, I played a typewriter. So you hear a typewriter, but it sounds like the blues. You hear like click, 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 click. I play a solo on the typewriter, right? Frank Zappa would have loved it. I mean, but we played rock. We did a killer version of Communication Breakdown. Harold wrote some songs that made it onto a famous radio show in LA. So we were, the funniest thing was this is before punk, and most of us were all Jewish kids in the band. So Harold used to call us a Jewish punk band. This is before the word punk ever. He said, people would describe it. What are the Winos? And we'd go, "Oh, we're a Jewish punk band." But we were a thing in LA for a while, and we snuck into a studio in the middle of the night to record a record because we didn't have any money. Making music is a journey. I think the reason the music is so good from the 60s and the 70s and through the 80s is because you have bands in a studio playing together, and there's a synergy that takes place. And somebody might make a mistake, or somebody might hear something that somebody else doesn't hear, whatever. There's a shared experience. That whole experience gets recorded. It's not just the notes.
Yeah.
You're going to feel human emotion and people playing off each other. And that's why, music from the 60s, 70s, 80s, I mean, this music is, not only is it not going away, it's experiencing another renaissance. If you look at Spotify numbers, a lot of pop stuff's going down, and what numbers are coming up are Fleetwood Mac and Tom Petty, and because kids want to go, what is this? I am into a lot of things. I love so many different things in life. Currently, I'm taking Latin dance lessons. So my
I
Latin
love it.
dance teacher, yeah, she's a doll. She has a husband. They dance professionally. It's over the top stuff, right? Um, he's from the Ukraine. Okay, they're younger. They're like 35, right? He told me, he goes, the Rolling Stones changed my life.
Hmm.
And I said, his name's Misha. I said, Misha, how did the Rolling Stones change your life? They changed my life when I'm 17 in the
Yeah.
British invasion. Okay, you're a kid from the Ukraine, and I'm sure it was some years ago, so maybe it was when he's 25 or 20, whatever. I said, how did the Rolling Stones change your life? And he goes, Paul, he goes, come on, man. He goes, that voice, the guitars,
Mm.
how can it not? So
Yeah.
this music is as good today as the day it was recorded. And this is what's happening. I just went to a recital the other day with a friend of mine's kid, 12-year-olds, 12-year-old kids. Kids' voice isn't even changed yet. Oh, we're going to start today. We're going to play Burn by Deep Purple.
Wow.
Like,
Well,
how do you even know Burn by Deep Purple? It's not even a hit. It's an album track.
Columbia, as an executive, you got to, how do you find that? How do you identify it early enough? Tell me about Columbia. When did you start with them?
I started in college. When I was at UCLA, I was a college rep. I don't know how old I was, 21, 22, but I started in 1969. They had a college rep program across the country at certain colleges. Interestingly enough, the guy who would become my first boss called his attorney. His attorney was an AE Pi alumnus from AE Pi. Calls the house. I was still a member of the house. I didn't live in the house anymore. I was sitting on the steps at UCLA, Jan steps, watching all the girls go by, and somebody comes up and says, "Hey, somebody's looking for a part-time person to work at a record company." They knew me from having stacks of amps in my fraternity room, and guitars and everything. And they said, "So we figure that's you. You're the guy that keeps us up at night with loud amplifiers." And they gave me a number, and I called the guy out of the blue. And it was a fascinating conversation because, I'm a student. I was learning how to play blues guitar. I loved music. I was well into the music scene. Like, I could tell you every player in Janis Joplin's band. I could talk to you about Jeff Beck and all these other people. And I said, well, but I also was coming from a place in the 60s where I was from this sort of hippie movement. So we were out to change the world. We were not about corporations. We thought about not working for the man, right? We're coming from this place, and I'm coming from that place. And I realized that Columbia Records is still a business. It's a corporation. And he's talking to me, and he's trying to, get me interested. And he goes, "Oh, you get to work with all the stars." I have an attitude like I'm a, punk. It's like, I can't believe I told this guy. I said, "Fuck the stars, man. I don't care about the stars. I'm not into all that glitz. I'm a serious blues guitar player. Like, come on. I'm learning how to play the blues." So anyway, he saw past my bravado because he was trying to come to grips with, why do I have to talk somebody into working in the music industry in 1969? And I guess, he didn't quite know from where I was coming from. So I said, well, tell me more, because I love music. He says, okay, well, that's the most important thing. So you're going to get $15 a week, which is not bad then. I mean, you could eat off $20 a week in at that time if you planned your meals right in college. He goes, you get all your records for free. You get a camera. You got to stop. I go, what? What did you just say? Did you just say I get all my records for free? He said, yeah. Now, you guys got to understand, I'm a blue-collar kid. A record album for $3, $3.50, $4, that's a luxury for a blue-collar kid. You can't have a big album collection, right? You could, but that's a lot of money in those days. To me, that's a luxury. So my album collection when I go to college is like smallish. It's got, 2 Stones albums, 2 Jimi Hendrix albums, Truth, Cream, and that's it. Maybe, for me. I'm thinking, that can't be right. I said, wait a second. Columbia is a big label, because I have some Columbia records. I mean, you have the Byrds, you have Janis Joplin, you have Bob Dylan, you have Miles Davis. You're telling me I got all my records for free? He says, yeah. And then if you're getting the record business, we trade with other labels. And my brain, like all my hippie ideals start to melt, right? I'm like, wait a minute. Wait, if I get all my records for free, it's a corporation, but it can't be that bad, right? If they give records for free, it can't be that evil, right? So I immediately flip out and go, all my records, he goes, yes. I go, okay, I'm in. I'm your guy. I don't care about the camera. I don't care about any of this other stuff. I'm coming right now. I'm getting my car. He's like, no, son, don't come now. I'm busy. Like, come a week from now, right? But it was the music. For me, it's always been about the music. Even though I know my job was to sell CDs, I rode gliders over Hollywood because I wanted to let people know how it was and still talk about the music and let people know, the music's still important and you should know these people and you should know the characters behind the scenes and you should know all this stuff because it looks like it's going to live forever. And it's always been that way for me. And I remember testing the system because I loved Miles Davis, right? Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough to meet him, by the way, and see him at school. He played a gig at UCLA. So there's a gratis form, Pink. At the time, there were 36 Miles Davis albums. And I wrote every one down, put every number down, turned it in, and then had a chuckle and went, they're going to look at this and just rip it up. They're going to laugh their asses off and throw it in the trash. Don't hear anything. 2 weeks later, come back to my apartment at the base of Laurel Canyon, and there's boxes. And I'm going, oh, this must be for the kid downstairs because I didn't order anything. And I look at the side, it says phonograph records. I'm like, are you kidding me? I bring them in my house. I open them up. 36.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Miles Davis albums. I'm in my living room with a sea of some of the greatest albums in the world, right? Going, oh my God. I married young. I got married in 1973, a couple of years after I started working at Columbia. By the time my wife moved in, I had amassed 10,000 albums.
Oh my gosh.
They were everywhere. They were stacked up in makeshift shelves. They were down the hall. They were in the spare bedroom. They were in the bathroom. Because it was, and no one could listen to that many records, but that's how things were happening. And the cute thing was when she walked in and saw that all I had was albums, a record player, and a tiny little bed and a rocking chair. That was it.
Right.
She says, do you think it would be okay if we had a kitchen table and chairs?
You were at the bottom of Laurel Canyon, so I'm imagining that before your free album record situation, that you made a few visits to Licorice Pizza or Auditory Odyssey.
Oh, I went to all those places. I met people that became huge record business executives. I mean, Gary Gersh became, you have to look him up. He became an amazing A&R guy. I met Gary. We were just kids. He was the buyer in Licorice Pizza. Go to Licorice Pizza. Hey, Gary, what are you doing? We were both deadheads. So we'd sit around and talk about Grateful Dead, eat licorice and whatever,
Just so you know, Jonathan, and anyone else who didn't grow up in LA. So Licorice Pizza was this like head shop / record shop in here in San Fernando Valley. And Quentin Tarantino emulated the shop and put it in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And so it's pretty infamous on this coast, and just in case you're wondering.
And the coolest thing was, it's the big marijuana time. Everybody's got the munchies, right? If you went to Licorice Pizza, they had free licorice, which enticed you into if you weren't going in for the music, even if you were going in for the licorice, as you're walking around eating licorice going, oh man, there's the Turtles. I don't have that record. I want to get that record. Awesome. So no, it was, those were fun times. That's when the music business was really fun.
I want to ask about, let's talk about a little bit, going through the book. You have so many great stories. We can barely scratch the surface today, but you mentioned right now an early encounter that you had with Tony Bennett, and he helped shape your career. Tell me how impactful he was for you. It was like very early in your career. So I just want to know, how did he impact you a little bit, and what was he like?
It was very surprising for me at the first. Again, I'm a rock kid, so to work with Tony Bennett, my dad was a huge fan of his. I had big respect for him, but he wasn't sort of on my radar of someone who I would normally talk to. Like, I'm winding up talking to Randy, California from Spirit, and Alvin Lee from 10 Years After, and all these types. But I went to it was a big Hollywood party at one of the big hotels, and it was for one of Tony's. I don't want to remember. I think it was Love Story. I can't remember. It was one of his albums, and it was a typical Hollywood party. People getting loose, dancing, a lot of drinks, a lot of food, whatever. And again, I'm still, immature in the mind, or just, I'm trying. If you come from the generation that I came from, there was an accent on being authentic. Mm-hmm. And so we looked at people that were older than us as kind of squares, and in the music business at that time, parts of it were duplicitous. It was the Hey Babe era. I would meet people in the business. If I went to a radio station with another promotion man to learn how to do this, right, when I was in college, he might say something, he might give an album to somebody and say, hey, there's not a bad track on the album, right? And you can't say that to people. I mean, that's not my approach, right? You can't. And I would just see the surfacey stuff, and the party looked kind of Hollywood, it looked kind of fake and everything. So after the party was over, I really needed help, because I actually was thinking about maybe not making this my life's work. I love music, but I didn't know I don't know anything about the business, right? I'm still in college. The music business, what is that going to be like? Tony was there. There's a picture in my book. He was still in his ascot pipe phase. And I don't know much about him. But I just say, Mr. Bennett, I need to talk to you. I'm new. I'm college rep for UCLA. I'm new to the business. Do you mind if I ask you some questions? And he said, no, son. What's going on? And I said, I love music, and I think I like the music business, but I'm meeting so many sort of like surfacey type people, and some people are kind of fake. And again, I didn't have a filter at that time, and it just all came tumbling out. And I said, this party, you know what, Tony? All these people, honestly, I don't even know if half of them even heard your record. I think they're just here for the party. I just think they're like hangers on. They're eating your food. They're drinking your booze. I don't like that. I said, you made like a really cool record. I listened to it like before I came here, right? Because that's something one should do, right? If, we should be aware. And it's really good record. I don't even think these people heard it. So I don't know, about the record business. And he looks down at me in his pipe and his ascot, and I think he's going to talk to me in, some kind of, great English parable or whatever. And he looks down at me and he goes, Paul, sometimes it's pretty fucked up. And I went, oh my God, this guy's so cool. Right? Yeah. He's a guy. Yeah. You wouldn't know it. It's like any of these artists that you don't know them till you know them. And he starts talking to me. He said, hey, look, he goes, I understand you're young. He says, but here's the most important thing. You love music. In this business, that's the most important thing. He says, let me tell you a story, which I wrote about in my book. And he talks about meeting Duke Ellington, because he said, look, I was a superstar. I left my heart in San Francisco. I was a world citizen. Then the music changed, and I found myself sort of out of sync, like, with pop music. And I went to see Duke Ellington for advice, because I wanted to change my style. And Duke said, no, Tony, you can't change who you are. You're an apple. You're the greatest Tony Bennett apple we have, right? Don't try to turn yourself into an orange, because it won't work for you. Just bide your time. It's a fickle business. People are fickle. Just do you. And people will come back. You'll see. They'll come back to you, and you'll be revered as you should. And so he turned his attention to me. He said, I'm going to tell you the same advice that Duke Ellington told me. Paul, you seem like a really cool guy. You love music. You can be you. You don't have to be them. You don't have to be duplicitous. You don't have to tell, slick stories about stuff. He says, I think just a little bit of chat that we've had, he said, just go be you. Do it your way. You'll do great. Yeah. That guy, and he changed my life, because when I walked out of there, I was like, oh man, okay. Well, then let me find out how I can be me, and let me find out how I can be creative. I had a big imagination, as you read about the book. I'm shooting laser beams off mountainsides.
That sounds so wise, because music is there's nothing more subjective than music, and it's broad, and that was just great wisdom from him. I love Tony Bennett.
Well, but look, you're talking about a guy who'd been around the block a bunch of times. He'd seen it all, done it all, and he's trying to help a young kid see his way through the business. Now, he and I became really good friends over the years, and I did a lot of work with him. I mean, I did so much work with him. I did radio shows with him. There used to be, I don't know if you guys ever saw on A&E, there was a TV show called A&E's Live by Request.
We're going to ask about that.
Where you would call in and talk to the artist. Okay. I created that show with Tony Bennett.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, so, here we go from, I'm just, we're meeting and he's helping me. Later on, I'm doing a radio show. He wants to know if we can take requests. I figure out how to do that. Danny Bennett, his son, comes out of the studio after the radio show and he goes, Rap, my nickname's Rap because my last name's Rappaport. He goes, Rap, this is a TV show. I go, it is? He goes, yeah. So I go back to Sony, which owned us at the time, talk to their TV people. They like it. I go pitch A&E. Next thing you know, I'm in the TV business, which I didn't know anything about. And that's a whole other story. I had to learn about that. But Tony, the show was created because Tony Bennett had an idea of how could I take requests from all over the country? How could I talk to the people? This is Tony. Okay. You want to know how Tony Bennett is? Tony Bennett is the everyman. Tony, if you sat down with Tony Bennett, he wouldn't even talk about himself. He wouldn't know about you. Tell me about you, okay? But his idea creates a radio show, then it creates a TV show. We wound up doing, we did every artist from David Bowie to Elton John to Neil Diamond to God knows how many, this is all Tony Bennett, right? First show we did with Tony was the pilot. And I said, okay, it's going to be live from Sony Studios. I said, Tony, it's a TV show, pull up in a long black limousine and we'll capture you with the camera. We'll live. We'll follow you out of the car and, down the hallway. It'll be the, big cool thing. He goes, nah, I'm not a limousine guy. I said, well, it's New York. How's about a horse and carriage, from Central Park? It'll be a big TV thing. No, I'm not that guy. He goes, I'm just going to pull up in a yellow. I said, you're going to pull up in a yellow cab. He goes, yeah, that's who I am. I'm just me. I'm going to pull up in yellow. I said, okay. Artist knows best a lot of times. I said, okay. Pulls up. So it's live, right? This is like a big deal. It's like primetime television. Pulls up in a yellow. Tony Bennett gets out of yellow, down the hall, does a great show, blah, blah. I call my dad the next day. He's a huge Tony Bennett fan, right? So you just see 2 hours of this show. My mom's freaking out because I have a card that says executive producer. Like she's like flipping out. It's like, Mom, ain't that big a deal. Don't freak out. Anyway, so I said, Dad, what'd you think of the show? You want to know the best part of that show, Paul? He was from Brooklyn, big barrel voice. You want to know the best part of that show, Paul? Tony Bennett getting out of a yellow cab. You want to know why? Because he's one of us. He's an everyman. He's one of us. That's the best part of your show, him getting out of a yellow cab. So, Tony knew that, but Tony, he's not overwhelmed with the celebrity. Like he went through that phase. Like he's done that already.
You were instrumental in getting Aerosmith going. So do you remember what it was like to hear their sound for the first time? Did you?
Yeah,
what were your thoughts?
It's interesting. And I will tell you this, I sometimes you play a small part in a big wheel because Columbia's so I can tell you the part that I played for Aerosmith, but there are other bands where actually I could look at it and go, oh my God, I think I really made a big difference. Like in these, Aerosmith, the first time I heard it, I was like, hey man, it's great. It's rock and roll, right? It didn't like blow my mind or anything, but I went, hey, these guys are talented, it's rock and roll. What people don't realize is that when anybody cuts something new and different, not everybody hears it right away. Now, my job was to get Aerosmith going in Los Angeles. I took that Aerosmith record over to the big rock station in town, KMET, and they said, hey, Rap, man, this is like too loud and too raunchy. And I said, well, isn't rock and roll loud and raunchy? And they were like, no, we're not sure. So there was down the way in Long Beach, which is just outside of LA, there was a KNAC radio station. And the guy that ran it was a guy named Ron McCoy. and he could play. He had more of an open mind to music, and he was able to play more new music. He wasn't worried about the ratings pressure.
Yeah.
You know, people like KMET and KLOS are like, well, they got to be careful about the new music. So a lot of records were started at this outside radio station, and then once they play, you know, music and it becomes popular, we start selling albums. And I go back to KMET and say, hey, by the way, Aerosmith is doing this now. And so, you know, and so I was able to help get them established that way. But for artists like Blue Oyster Cult, Psychedelic Furs, Men at Work, Midnight Oil, Alice in Chains, I play a much bigger role, you know, in those situations because generally because that music isn't automatic to a lot of ears, and so it would take someone like myself to lead the charge. Right. So it would be like, hey, I hear this. I'm going to make something happen. It doesn't necessarily happen all the time that a record company sends a memo with a priority. There are priorities that come down. Then there's a bunch of records that just ship. And if you can make something, if you hear it and you can make something from it, it's great. That's how freewheeling things were, especially in the 70s. But even in the 80s. You know, a friend of mine signed the Psychedelic Furs. Weird name, acquired taste in the beginning. I loved it. He was the A&R guy. He was so happy that I loved it. But I'm out, you know, trying to help this band called the Psychedelic Furs, you know, to radio stations that, you know, if you hear India or some of these early Psychedelic Furs songs before they have hits, you know, it takes someone like me to say, hey, go with me on this. You know, trust me on this. As a promotion man, you have credibility. So, you know, when Alice in Chains came around, nobody wanted to play Alice in Chains. I mean, you read that in the book. That's quite a story, that whole.
Yeah.
But for Aerosmith, I always felt like I was just like I played my part, you know.
But you help with the promotion of Aerosmith, which is kind of like a little bit of the title of the book.
Of course.
No.
Of course I do. I mean, the title of the book is Gliders Over Hollywood. Right. The gliders are Aerosmith gliders that have Aerosmith painted across the wings. It's just because I'm such a big kid that before I take them to radio and the record stores to hang up to make a thing about it, you know, I get these gliders and I'm like, oh my God, we got to fly these off the roof of the building. They'll go forever. Yeah. So the guy in the mailroom, like, hey man, we got to go and fly these gliders. And from the 14th floor of our building overlooking Sunset Boulevard, you could see the Hollywood Freeway, the Hollywood Bowl. We're sponsoring glider races, right? And you know, every day at noon, people would come up and fly gliders with us. Well, one day Elton John showed up. He wasn't on Columbia, but he was went to see a friend who used to be his road manager, who was now working for us. So, you know, he called us in and meet Elton. You know, Elton's a cool guy. He looks just like Elton John should, with the big rose, you know, big sunglasses and platform boots. And so we're like, Elton, first of all, come to the mailroom, because he loved music. And in the mailroom, we had records for days. So we give him free records. He's got records up over his head. He is in heaven. And then we go, hey, look, man, we're flying gliders off the roof. You want to fly gliders? And Elton's going, yeah, sure. And I go, put the records down. We go up on the roof. Now we're thinking, well, Elton John, you know, take me to the pilot. Rocket Man, he must be a good glider pilot, right? And like, we're like bobbleheads. What do we know? Anyway, so we spent all afternoon with Elton flying gliders over Hollywood. Elton's going, I think I could hit the Hollywood Bowl, right? It was another reason I wrote the book. I wanted people to realize, you read this book, you hopefully are having a blast, man, because fun was part of our job description. You're talking about a business where there's bowling in the hallways in the afternoon, water gun fights. You know, these are, I once had a fencing duel with Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden. We discovered we were both fencers. And I'm having a duel with him down the hallways in headquarters in New York City, down the 12th floor. It was a famous floor because it was all Columbia Records. And I said, you want to race on my eyebrows? He said, yeah. I said, bring your gear in. And we're going to, you know, mask the whole thing, the whole uniform, and we're going to fence down the 12th floor, right? Even in a business that's as wacky as the record business was, Nobody had ever seen anybody fencing past their desks. I was like, it was fucking nuts. And so I tried to write this book like so that you're there, like
Oh,
you
it's
guys.
fantastic.
It's not, you don't read it like, oh, this happened, then that happened. You're reading conversations.
Sure.
You have conversations with Mick Jagger, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan. I want everybody to have fun like I had fun, and to just know how crazy this business was. Rock and roll business in the 80s, okay? Journey, okay? Who doesn't know Journey? Don't Stop Believing and a million other hits, right? Their manager got on a Yiddish kick. I have no idea why. It's not even Jewish. He sends Yiddish for Dummies books out to the entire industry. If you want to talk to me or our famous road manager, Pat Bubba Morrow, if you want to talk to me or Bubba, you need to speak a couple lines of Yiddish. I get the book. I get the letter. It's cute. Fine. Great. I'll never forget this. It's a Thursday. We're selling, I can't remember which album it is, but we're selling 50,000 albums a week. And when you have to pick a single, this is a timely conversation, because to keep momentum going, the single has to be produced. You have to announce it to the rock stations. You have to know, and then the next week it's got to go. Herbie Herbert, line one. Hey, Herbie, how you doing? It's Rap. Was machst du? He starts speaking Yiddish. I'm like, Herbie, I got the book. It's cute. It's great. This is a heavy conversation. We have to have it right away. He keeps speaking Yiddish for 2 minutes. Finally, he stops and he goes, Rap, what the fuck? A nice Jewish boy like you can't learn a couple lines of Yiddish? I'm like, Herbie, yes, I can, but this is an important conversation. It's timely. You and I have to decide today the single. He goes, I know. Learn your Yiddish and call me back. Click.
I love his obsession.
No,
at the
dude,
time.
Moosie, this is rock and roll business in the 80s. In order for me to get the single out of the manager, I have to learn 2 lines of Yiddish. Otherwise, I don't. And I have to
That's fantastic.
get the book and learn 2, and call her back. We're speaking Yiddish, we get to the single. I mean, people need to know how nuts it was. Okay, this is business. This is big business. This is millions of dollar business. And if I don't learn my Yiddish, I don't get the single. You get it?
But that's brilliant, Paul. This is what's great about your book. That story about the Yiddish and all that stuff, about Elton John flying a glider. That's what people want to see. By the way, it's Bernie Taupin, apparently, who take me to the pilot and all that stuff.
Sorry. That's why Elton wasn't
Yeah. But I think
he wasn't as good as we thought we were going to be.
Right. But that's the interesting, those are the gems. That's what makes your book so great. That's what people want to know.
I appreciate it.
Well, I wanted to ask about Springsteen, because he's another one whose career you helped at the beginning. We've had on Gary U.S. Bonds here, who talked a little about Springsteen's early days. So I've seen him in concert several times. He was phenomenal. So how did you help him a little bit? And what were those early days like? Just first hearing him in the E Street Band.
Yeah. See, somebody like Bruce, I'm a bigger part of his career. In the early days, I got an album just showed up, Greetings from Asbury Park, right? I mean, and I hear it. It had Dylan overtones, and the first album, and I went, wow, this guy's a poet like Bob. And I went, who is this guy's like really cool? Who is this guy? So I take an interest myself automatically. This is not coming down from higher up. This isn't like, here's your priorities and your second priority is Bruce Springsteen. It's none of that. So I get this music. I tried to get it played. It was a very different kind of music. He had Clarence in the band, and there were horns and sax and tuba and all this kind of stuff. So there were only a couple of people that were interested. But when I saw him live, Springsteen's records, as good as they are, and some of them are amazing, but to see Bruce Springsteen live is an experience you'll never forget. So when I saw him live at the Troubadour, I remember I was with my wife. We went to see him live at the Troubadour. And then we knew we were seeing the next big thing. I mean, it was clear that this guy was going to become the Elvis Presley of our times. I mean, it was that amazing. I left there almost in shock. And I remember I had to report back to New York how this show went. Springsteen plays a guitar called an Esquire. It's a Fender shape, and it looks like a Telecaster, but it's a model before Telecaster. It's called Esquire. Now, back in the day, we used to have a thing called a Twix machine. You typed something in LA and it showed up in New York. So it's like before computers, right? But I made my assistant, my poor assistant, I made her type the note in the shape of the Esquire guitar, so that when the people got it in New York, the Esquire guitar showed up, but you read it like 2 words down the neck, and then it got wider.
Yeah.
He wasn't really on the radar of, let's say, a president of Columbia Records or a president of marketing, until some of us on the rock side started to make things happen for him. Because the way that it eventually worked was, we would break artists on rock radio, like FM radio in the 70s was becoming very important. By the time 1975 comes, we're selling a lot of records. We don't need top 40. I mean, Bruce Springsteen could sell 1 million records just having a rock album on rock radio. Of course, if you have a hit record, then you're going to sell 4 million. But part of my job was to build artists on rock radio, and then they would cross over to top 40. And you'd sell so many records at rock, and then whatever band it was, cross them over to top 40. It could be Bruce Springsteen, it could be Journey, it could be Psychedelic Furs, Men at Work, doesn't matter. Start, at rock. So the early days, there's really only a handful of us who we're actually promoting our own record company from within. We're like, hey, you guys up there, get ready for this guy. In fact, there's a funny story that's not in my book, but one of my good friends is a guy named Peter Philbin. He's an A&R guy. Okay, he signed the Psychedelic Furs, he signed the Bangles. Early on in his career, he was one of the big Bruce supporters. And Bruce would come up and just hang out in his office. I think Bruce sometimes slept in his office because Bruce was having trouble at home. Right? And Bruce, he's broke, right? So all he's got is like muscle shirts and jeans. He looks like a vagrant, right? The head of CBS, right, Walter Yetnikoff, this is a fabulous story, would walk in and he'd grab Peter and he'd go, Peter, this isn't a good look for you. This guy who keeps hanging out here, like, you got to get him out of here. Like, this isn't a good look for you. You're a record exec, right? And Peter, or Walter, go, Walter, I don't think you understand who this guy is or who this guy is going to become, right?
Yeah. What was your experience like with Bob Dylan, working with him?
My first experience was I was so in awe of the guy because I am a child of the 60s, and he did change the culture. Yeah. He doesn't like that mantle to be the leader of a generation. But, sometimes the times make the man. And you're talking about civil rights and Vietnam, and he's writing Blowing in the Wind, and the times they are changing, and the youth movement. That's an artist like the Rolling Stones who shaped who I was as a young man growing up, right? And he is, in my opinion, the greatest songwriter of our generation. I mean, I mean, he's the Shakespeare of our times. I mean,
right. Well,
this guy. So when I meet him, frankly, I'm like starstruck. I'm dumbfounded. I mean, you're looking at Bob Dylan. You can't help it. It's all
right. Paul, do you know if this is true? Because I can't remember where I got it from, a documentary or I read it somewhere or whatever. But to your point, I remember it was like We Are the World, or one of these fundraising situations where you've got Michael Jackson and everybody, all these huge people. And the story goes that there are all these like icons, and they were all in awe when Bob Dylan walked in. Like they were just like feeling not worthy about being in his presence.
No, it's true. And I think, and a lot of people don't get Bob. I understand it. It's acquired taste. But if you do your homework and if you do your research, and anybody out there who's watching this or listening to this, if you're not a Bob Dylan fan, just go read the lyrics of Hurricane.
It's the lyrics.
Right, just read the lyrics of Hurricane. It's about a fighter, Hurricane Carter, and then listen, and then listen to the music. Listen to the poetry and listen to the music. Yeah. And then you'll understand the poetry of how this guy paints a story. Yeah. And the words that he uses. And then if you like that, go listen to Blood on the Tracks, and then go from there, right? But it's a fact, okay? It's not my opinion, okay? The guy just is amazing. Look, this guy in his late years has put out 2 amazing records. Time Out of Mind and Rough and Rowdy Ways. What other songwriter can do that in your late 70s, 80s?
Yeah.
He's the guy's, so he told me, he said, Paul, look, the problem with me is when people meet me, they think they're meeting the lyrics. He goes, I know how heavy the songs are. He goes, I wrote them, but the lyrics are the lyrics. The songs are the songs. I'm me. I'm a person. I'm different. But
Right.
and I was a victim of that. You can't help it. You look at the guy and you're talking to him and you think the lyrics are going to come out of his mouth, but he's just a guy, right?
Yeah.
So it took, after about 5 meetings with him, then we had a really great relationship. And I will tell you that there's like 3 or 4 things that I hold very dear in my life, in 30 plus years at working for Columbia Records. And one of those things is having a real relationship with Bob Dylan, like guy to guy.
Oh, I don't blame you.
I also became a magician, and we used to do magic tricks for Bob because he liked card magic. So I would go backstage and do card sleights for Bob, but we would talk about kids sometimes, just how is it to raise kids. He's an amazing person. I remember one day I had to do a video. I took him, we went to dinner and I said, look, I got to talk to you about a video. And he said, no, I just came back from Russia. They gave me an award, a big poet award.
Mm-hmm.
He was so excited, to be recognized as a poet. And he said, you got to start, you need to read these books, these Russian poets, you need to read these books. And I said, okay, Bob, but I have to talk to you about the video. He's like, forget the video, man. You got to read these books.
I love it.
Yeah.
So, it was just it was neat to have a relationship. I got to help him, as you'll read in the book. He had some down times too. Mm-hmm. And he had some times where he got out of focus. And you want to know something was cool for me? I'm a kid growing up. He changes my life. He's having a hard time. I get to help Bob Dylan. Oh, come on, man. How cool is that? Like, I get to give back to Bob Dylan. Are you kidding me? Out of love, right? You just love these people. How would you
I do have to ask one Dylan question, because your book kind of confirmed something. And because I've been reading for like years, I'm a Dylan fan also, that Bruce Springsteen idolized him, but that wasn't reciprocated at the beginning.
No.
So he had different feelings on Bruce.
Well, he thought that Bruce, honestly, he thought that Bruce ripped off his whole persona.
Oh.
If you listen to Greetings, and you listen to some of those Dylan-esque things, right? And Bruce is a poet, so Bob felt that Bruce had ripped him off. Really, had ripped off his whole thing. And also, you have to remember that when Bruce starts to come out, and the press is saying, "Oh, it's the next Bob Dylan," as far as Bob's concerned, there only needs to be one Bob Dylan. There doesn't need to be a second Bob Dylan. So one day he comes into my office. And that was a big part of Bruce's career, which you read about in the book. So he sees I have a big Bruce poster, right? He looks at the poster and he looks at me and he goes, "Is that guy still driving that stolen car?" Right? Only Bob Dylan could come up with that line.
Yeah.
Is that guy still driving that stolen car? And I said, "Bob, come on, man." I said, he emulates you. He loves you. I said, look at Woody Guthrie. What would you have been, Bob Dylan, without Woody Guthrie? Woody
that's
Guthrie,
a great comeback. It's
right?
it's a compliment. He's honoring
right, that's
you.
what I'm trying to tell him, right? It's like, okay, Woody Guthrie begets Bob Dylan begets Bruce Springsteen, some other cat's going to come along and listen to Bruce. I go, he's not copying you. He would not be who he is without you.
Absolutely.
Don't you get it? You're an influence. But look, artists are competitive. Paul Simon was miffed because he didn't get the same kind of, "Oh my God," about your songwriting about Bob Dylan. Paul would go, "Geez, I'm Paul Simon," but everyone wants to talk about Bob Dylan. Well, Bob's Bob, and but my God, Paul Simon, you're one of the greatest American songwriters ever. But artists they're neurotic. They're they never know when it's going to be over. Like they never know when their last rodeo is, or the last album. And all of a sudden, people decide they don't want to hear them anymore. So it's not an odd thing.
It's a little discouraging to feel like in these examples, like they'll never be happy. Be happier, Paul Simon, because you're a wordsmith and you're a genius. You know what I mean? Why do you got to get all the way where you got to get all the way up there and then say, well, but I'm not that guy, like that's just crazy from where I
Moosie it is, but you want to know something? Billy Joel. Every time he Billy goes, well, rap, but Bruce is the best. I go, Billy, Billy, you're freaking Billy Joel. You're like, Billy, do I have to remind you you're Billy Joel? No, I know. But Bruce, is it really the guy? Like Bruce is the best, right? And they don't necessarily have a view of themselves that's correct because they're, they're the sun. Imagine okay, here's the universe. There's the sun. And all of us are planets and we're revolving around the sun. We have perspective. Oh, here's how sunlight works. Here's how moonlight works. Here's how the universe works because we see it. They don't see it because they are the sun.
You were there for the creation of I Don't Like Mondays with Bob Geldof and the Boomtown Rats. Can you just go over that story? Because I thought it was so incredible that you were there for that.
I happened to be with Bob doing a promotional tour for the Boomtown Rats. And, this incident had taken place in San Diego where this young gal was on a tower with a gun shooting kids. Now, this is a long time ago. This is before, sadly, so many shootings we've been through in this country, which is so hard to believe. So this is an outrageous, oh my God, story. And we were in a college radio station when this came over the news. We're all in shock. Like we hear it live radio and it was on a ticker tape. It was the news comes up printed. And then Bob said, do you mind, can I have that piece of paper? And Bob writes songs in a lot of different ways. And I came to understand that he would get ideas from news items. He's very politically minded. He's very worldly. And he grabbed the paper and he put it in his pocket. And I went, that's odd. Why would Bob want that? The other thing I remember, though, is we got in a limousine to go to the next place. And he said jokingly, Bob's has a weird sense of humor, sometimes a dark sense of humor. And he said, he goes, a silicone chip in her head must have switched to overload. And then he went, which I thought was dark. Anyway, I don't think anything about it. He had to go to a party that night at the Atlanta branch. I think I had to go to Dallas. But he and I had a conversation beforehand. He was very upset because he had been spoiled because the Boomtown Rats were very big stars in Britain, right? They had blown Ireland to pieces. They were the first big Irish band. So they're like the Beatles of Ireland, the people in England, Paul McCartney's kids love the Boomtown Rats. He's a superstar. Now he comes to America, no one knows who he is. It's hard for him to walk this line. He has a bit of a swagger, but he's not allowed to here. And I explained to him, I said, Bob, your music is big in Europe because you're writing songs for Europe. You're writing about Eva Braun. You're writing about Mary of the Fourth Form, which is the fourth grade. People, we don't even know what that is here. If you want to break in America, you're going to have to write a song like, a Neil Young or a Bruce Springsteen, something that resonates for America. So I said, you're going to have to write a song that, resonates for America. Within 2 weeks, I get a phone call. He goes, I got this song. I said, I thought about, what you were talking about. So, okay. So he's got an acoustic guitar. He sings to me over the phone. Sings I Don't Like Mondays over the phone. I'm floored. The first thing I think of is like, Jesus, that's a little raw. I mean, this thing just happened. Like this girl just shot somebody. And then when she was interviewed, they said, why did you do it? And she said, well, I don't like Mondays. Right. And then she went on to say something else. So the first thing I think of is like, boy, man, this is too soon. Is he really, is he using this? And then I realized it's the way Geldof brain works. Stuff goes in and songs come out. And I said, Bob, that's a pretty powerful song. I said, I said, I'll tell you what you should do. You should start playing that song for people now, wherever you go on the acoustic guitar. If you and I are out, promoting radio, great. I don't care if you're in London or if you're in the States. Play that song now, I said, because it's going to give you credibility in a country where people don't know how to view you. they hear about this Boomtown Rats guy and they see this big tall guy, but they don't they don't get it, right? I said, but if you play this song, you're going to get the big respect from program directors and music directors and radio people and press people. They will understand that you are a poet yourself, that you're a songwriter, right? And even before the album comes out, play this song. And it established him where people go, oh, whoa, we have to pay attention to this guy, right? And so when it got recorded, it was recorded in a fashion that, it just flew on the radio. I mean, it was a big
Great
hit.
song.
Yeah, and it was a big top 40 hit. It was a great song for them. So it launched, Bob Geldof and the Boomtown Rats in this country. And yeah, so it was amazing to sort of be in that moment and, maybe have a tiny hand in, something like that by just suggesting that, here's a try this, kind of thing.
What prompted you to write your book? And, was it a moment where like, okay, that's it, I'm writing a book?
No, it was a long moment. When I left Columbia, I had a production company for a little while, and then I did indie promotion for a little while. And all along, I used to think, man, these were the most wonderful times. And I love telling stories. I think I got that from my dad. I'm just sort of a natural storyteller, and all these crazy things that happened. And I said, somebody needs to write this, because artists are writing books about their personal time. So if you read Bruce's book, you read about Bruce and his situation, and Eric Clapton's book about his situation. But I thought no one's really covered the whole scene. How did, what was the scene like? What was radio like? What was it like to work for a record company?
Yeah.
What was it like to be a salesman? But to write it in an entertaining fashion so that people see everything, to meet the artist, meet the behind the scenes people, meet some producers who are batshit crazy, but
Right.
you love them, right? So I thought about it, but I'm a natural storyteller, but I wasn't a natural writer. So I wrote a blog for 10 years. For a website called Classics du Jour, which is a classic rock website. And then I wrote a blog for 10 years, and I learned how to write. And my writing got better and better and better and better and better. And after 10 years, I went, I think I could actually write. It's a different craft. Writing's different than storytelling, verbally. I thought I could really write now. And it'd been nagging at me, like something from up there, spiritual, like, dude, write this book. And finally this voice became a roar. It was like, write the fucking book. I was like, okay. Yeah. So then I told my partner, Judy LeBeau, I said, Judy, she's ex-Atlantic legendary promotion person. I said, Judy, I think I'm going to write this book, but it's a real job. I said, I can't do this at night. I can't work during the day with you, work, these projects. This is like a get up every day, have a cup of coffee, write. And so it was a long time coming. I mean, you're talking 6 years.
Yeah.
Has anybody come back with they're kind of upset about anything you wrote? People
are upset. No one has said anything about anything. It's funny. You read a lot of things like I go right up to the line, but I don't cross the line in some areas because, why would I? I have wonderful relationships with all these people.
Can your next book be fine? I'll cross it.
Yeah. Right. Next book could be called Dirt, the Dirt, right? But no, that wasn't about that. But interestingly enough, at any rate, so look, I started to write it, 6 years, edit, rewrite, throw stuff out, put stuff in, 4 editors later, like to make it the best it could be. This is something that took a really long time, but it had, suffice to say, it had been nagging at me for a long time to do it. I did not think it would take this long to do it, but I wanted it to be great. I didn't want it to be good. I wanted it to be great. So it's like, Steve Perry from Journey, he used to preach to the band because he would drive that band crazy. Timeless music takes time. So I felt the same way. I took that to heart and I just kept writing, but, I've gotten a wonderful response to it. But, so no one has called me to complain yet. I wasn't worried about anything I wrote, except, there is that, the New Barbarians tour with Ron Wood and Keith gets kind of druggy. And I didn't tell everything I saw because I wouldn't, but, there's some things in there. And 2 years ago, I sent it to Keith's person, Jane Rose, for all intensive purposes, is his
Mhm.
manager. And I said, Jane, just so you know, I'm writing, this is what's in the book. I want you to see it if you want to send it to Keith.
Right.
And I get a note back from Jane that says, Keith is very busy. He doesn't give a shit. Just send him a hard copy when it's out.
Yeah.
Which, if you know Keith Richards, is exactly right. What am I going to write? That hasn't been written, right?
Yeah.
Because the truth is, Keith doesn't give a shit.
No, he was great, and his book was great.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. He's a
yeah.
very wonderful human being. He wrote what he wrote. So that was my only worry, because most everybody else, they're really, I'm showing the bright side of people. I want to show, a lot of people get down on Roger Waters now because he can be a acerbic, his personality. But I write some nice things about Roger Waters. I'm not going to pile on Roger Waters. Let's stick to the music, right?
Yeah.
And so the book is mostly that. So you read, these different things about these people in that way. So I don't really expect to, anybody to be mad. There's two villains in my book, and I don't give you their names. I just tell you, one is the general manager of KMET, and the other is the head of A&R for Epic Records at a particular time in the book. And you don't need to know their names, because I don't have to.
Rhymes with.
No, I'm not. No, I don't need to.
I love that you do that. Yeah,
I don't need to embarrass their families.
Before Jonathan signs you off, I want two things I want to say. One is that it's time, I think, therapeutically, you let go of your anger towards Karen Carpenter. She earned it. She deserved it.
I wasn't that. I was
I'm
angry
kidding.
that she got a record deal.
I'm kidding. I was just going back to your high school.
No, I understand.
Before we started this.
Right, but let me just say one thing, because I get to, right. If I finally have a platform here, I would love the world to know how beautiful Karen Carpenter was as a human being. Because most people, they think of the big tabloid story. Oh my God, she died because she had a problem with, anorexia or whatever that is. I don't want that to be the first thing people think of. I would love for people to just know what a beautiful human being she was. What a beautiful voice she had. What a gift she gave to this world.
Yeah.
That's how people should remember Karen Carpenter.
And it wasn't just that she had an amazing, I feel sadness for her, because in some of her songs, she was present. She sang from her inside, like you felt her. And it was that was on top of her having this God gift of a voice. I mean, so she was one of a once in a lifetime talent. Anyway, and you're making me really feel bad that one day, I don't know whatever happened to my 94.7 KMET shirt, but that was a big deal. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, well, that was a popular T-shirt. And
of course, we all had those. Yeah, of course we did. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I was wondering when you talked about the concert that you went to, not the concert, the tour that you went on with Keith Richards and Ron Wood. I was like, how much is left out on this one? But I was exactly wondering that. But
that tour was better living through chemistry. I mean, it was Hang On for Dear Life. It was 7 days and nights. That was like one long movie to me. Yeah. And you read about it in the book, but there are things I saw that I wouldn't write that just went over the line. Like, okay, this is just over the line. I want to put
you on the spot with one thing, because here's one thing on the spot that you don't have to answer, but you've been to so many. In your opinion, what's the best concert that you've been to?
That's an easy one. The best concert that I ever saw was Jimi Hendrix live at the Hollywood Bowl.
Wow.
Which I'd have to look at my own book. I think it's 1968. I went with my girlfriend at the time. None of us had ever seen anything like that, which is one of the reasons I wrote about that in the book, because it's interesting. The publisher said it's the only artist that you don't, in the book, that you're not working with or that you don't have a relationship with. And I said, yeah, but it's important because I want people to know what this was. Okay. Jimi Hendrix became something from out of this world. There's no big light show, which I thought was strange in the beginning. Like, Jesus, Jimi Hendrix is psychedelic, Jimi Hendrix walks out just like a normal person with the other two guys in the band is Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding. And I'm with my girlfriend going, is that them? Like, would they just do that? And Hendrix gets on the mic and he goes, hey, everybody, how you doing? I can't remember how he started, but he said some song titles. Yeah, we're going to start with Are You Experienced? And then maybe we'll get into Purple Haze. And then, maybe we'll jam a little bit. And, and then we'll get into Foxy Lady. And if that's okay with everybody. Now I'm watching this going, this is it? As soon as the first notes hit, right? Dun, 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 dun. Jimi Hendrix and the electric guitar melt into each other. It looks like a Salvador Dali painting. If you see old newsreels of Hendrix, he becomes the guitar. The guitar becomes him. He's only plugged into one fuzz tone box. It's called an arbiter fuzz face and a wah-wah pedal. That's it. There's plugged into a Marshall amp turned up to 11, a couple of Marshall amps. It's his art with the electric guitar. It's the most electric guitar you'll ever hear. There's nothing like Jimi Hendrix to this day. You can ask anybody, even you ask Neil Schon from Journey, amazing guitar player. What do you listen to? I listen to Jimi Hendrix. I haven't found anything better. But to watch him become this almost like a shaman, playing this music, using feedback as a art form to play these songs. Most guitar players, like I'm a guitar player, right? We play notes from the neck, to the nut, to the body of the guitar. That's where our notes are, not Hendrix notes. Hendrix notes are from Pluto, Saturn. I don't know where these notes come. Listen to these, the whammy bar, you listen to all this stuff. So you're witnessing an experience that it would almost like an alien has landed. This guy has become something that you're just in awe of, right? He doesn't need fancy lights. He just is that. And he's playing this stuff. And get this, he's like a shaman. We're like walking towards the stage. The whole Hollywood Bowl is walking towards the stage like zombies, right? Because the music is pulling us in. There used to be a fountain in front of the Hollywood Bowl where the orchestra played. Okay. Like 30 kids jumped into the fountain and they're swaying to the music. Wow. And he had to stop the show for a second because he was like, hey, there's a lot of electricity up here. Don't splash water on the stage. Somebody at the Hollywood Bowl figured out, oh, let's get the kids out of the fountain. Turn the fountain on. They turn the fountain on. 60 more kids jump in. You can look this up on the internet. This is a famous concert that I happen to be at. Kids are swaying in this pool. The music is fierce. The cops can't control it. It's out of control. The whole thing is like this giant experience. We've never heard anything like it. We've never seen anything like it. If you listen to Jimi Hendrix records to this day, you'll never hear anything like it. Listen with headphones and the panning of the guitars and all this kind of stuff. And then, now it's known, but then, okay, we've never seen this before. At the end, just when you think your brains are blown to smithereens, he takes the guitar off, puts lighter fluid on it, lights the guitar on fire, and he's going like this with his hands, and these flames are going up, right? And the feedback is still coming out of the amps, and Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding are like if you had never experienced LSD, you were there now. Wow. So, that is that experience. And I swear to God, guys, I'm in the business. I've seen them all. I've seen multiple Rolling Stones, multiple Bruce Springsteen, multiple people. I mean, you name it. I've seen thousands of shows. That show is there, and then there's a space. And whatever the next show I saw, whether it's Bruce or Pink Floyd, name them, there's tons of them. Sorry, there's a space. That's how amazing Jimi Hendrix was.
Thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic. That's fascinating. But what's crazy about this, and it's like such a wonder, is that you could take the same guitar any other guitarist can pick up. You got a distortion box and you got an amp, and Hendrix can pick it up, and you can isolate one chord, and other musicians would go, "Oh, Hendrix."
Yes.
His sound. I don't know how. I mean, obviously.
He played in a lot of bands for a lot of years, so he knew a lot of things.
Yeah.
Then okay,
Genius.
but you have to realize, okay, now, you know, he plays the guitar upside down and backwards. So it's going to sound a little different because the chords are going to sound a little different, right? Because of that nature. But I do believe that Hendrix was channeling sounds and things. Look, you're talking about a time of mind expansion.
Mhm.
Early Beatles songs, if you listen to them, there's some LSD references. I think that Jimi Hendrix mind was expanded. He became psychedelicized. And I think that had a lot to do with what his music became, because his music becomes otherworldly.
Right.
People don't, if you listen to Jimi Hendrix records, and Neil Schon explained this to me. He said, Paul, if you listen to Jimi Hendrix records, the bass player, Noel Redding, he doesn't play bass notes that are snapped to a grid. It's not bum, 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 bum. It's more like a tuba. He's going woo, woo. So Hendrix can play all these kind of swimming solos that are not snapped to a grid. In fact, Neil Schon changed the whole way he makes solo records. Now he plays the leads first and has the bass player play the bass afterwards, so that Neil doesn't have to be snapped to bars of music, that he can play. So I think I believe that Jimi Hendrix was a lot of that music comes from the drugs of the day, marijuana. I mean, listen, if you listen to those records in headphones, they're made for people that are high on marijuana. You're hearing panning. You don't have to be high, but if you're on a drug, and if you're on mescaline or LSD, and you hear these sounds, they're built for that head space that you're in. Another band that's not dissimilar, they're not like Jimi Hendrix, but Grateful Dead. Yeah, the Grateful Dead is a band that has a work ethic. They're a great band. All of a sudden, Ken Kesey comes to town. All of a sudden, they're taking acid. Okay. All of a sudden, the music changes because they're making music while they're on LSD. Now, that takes a second, because if you ever take acid, you the first thing you do is just look at your guitar melt, and you wouldn't be able to play, right? So you're seeing these hallucinations. But they learn how to play. So now the drug is taking this music beyond where it normally would come from. And, some people don't get the Grateful Dead. They don't understand it. Some people, myself was a big fan from back in the day, and I understand, how they are. So, that's another band that the music's different and it's otherworldly because it's not of all this earth. It's from an expanded mind. Just look, the American Indian, just took peyote. I mean, this is, this mind, and it let them see things. They saw read about the American Indian. My God, they talk about spirits and that we're all one, and that, a fish and a rock and a tree, we're all the same. So these, those are two instances. But Hendrix just channeled something out of this world that no one, maybe Jeff Beck, got close to the electric guitar in that fashion,
Wow.
Well, we want to thank you so much for coming on today. We could talk to you all day long.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry if I bent your ear, because clearly you can see I'm a guy that can talk all day.
No,
this is why we asked you to be here, to tell us exactly those types of things. Absolutely.
No, this is the book. First of all, is fantastic. I want to make Gliders Over Hollywood. I recommend everyone get it. It was I was fascinated going through it. Like I said, there were so many stories that we didn't get to that I loved reading, and we just scratched the tip of the iceberg today.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. When does this air, by the by?
We'll get to that in a second. As soon as we
we're going to wrap up the show. Let's wrap up the show. Let's be professional, for God's sake.
Us? Come on.
Not you two guys.
Well, again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Moosie Drier. And again, a very special thanks to Paul Rappaport. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thank you for tuning in to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast. Listening to this podcast just makes you really cool.